Welcome to the Belonging Chronicles. This is a production of Revolve Consulting, a business dedicated to helping organizations and the people within them build and sustain a culture of belonging for all. In this episode, we'll start off by spending some time talking about resilience and toxic resilience, and why understanding the difference between the two is so critical to our well-being and building a culture of belonging. After that, we'll welcome our very first guest, Dr. Carol Battle, and we'll discuss her ongoing work to identify and disrupt harms of being the one and only, or one of few, Black women in an organization, and how that connects to building resilience for those from marginalized communities. And finally, we'll engage in our how-to discussion, thinking specifically about a common challenge that those who often don't experience belonging in their organizations face. Let's get started. I'm Jeff Bucholtz. I use any and all pronouns.
And I'm Janelle Williams Melendrez, and I use she, her pronouns.
So let's start off by having a conversation that is central to our ability to build and sustain belonging in our lives and our organizations: resilience. To kick us off, we're going to play a quick clip from the podcast Diary of a CEO, in which we hear from Dr. Aditi Narukar, a medical doctor and expert on stress.
But we've got those posters up in our kitchens, keep calm, carry on. That's like a hallmark of society today, is to just tough it out and carry on. And we're praised for that. We're praised for our resiliency. Resilience is a good thing, right?
Beautifully said, keep calm and carry on. Resilience, the true scientific definition of resilience, is our innate biological ability to adapt, recover, and grow in the face of life's challenges. But resilience doesn't function in a vacuum. You need stress for resilience to show itself. Without stress, there can be no resilience. So think of swimming. The swim instructor is the stress saying, like, you can make it to the other side. And your resilience is what keeps your head up as you're swimming while your arms are flailing. And then with time and practice, it gets better. What you're describing, keep calm and carry on, is a manifestation of hustle culture. And our entire modern society is built on this idea of toxic resilience. And so what is toxic resilience? Resilience went from being something that's true, which is honoring your boundaries, making space and time for rest and to recharge, focusing on a sense of self-compassion, and understanding that you are a human being with limitations. That is true resilience. Toxic resilience is productivity at all costs, a mind over matter mindset. And what many of us think of as true resilience is in fact toxic resilience. We are taught from a very young age that dealing with discomfort and being okay with discomfort is what resilience is all about. And I am here to debunk that, because absolutely not. Resilience is our innate biological ability, but it also needs rest and recovery. It is not meant to be toxic. We all have the power and the aptitude for true resilience. But toxic resilience is what we often see and what is often promoted. And that is something that needs to stop.
So Janelle, when I saw this, I immediately thought of the work that we do, because this idea of toxic resilience just seemed so familiar to me. The expectation that we keep calm and carry on. And it just seemed to me that this idea can be harmful to anyone and everyone's well-being. But I particularly thought about it in the context of those people inside of organizations who are and have historically been asked to keep calm and carry on in the face of people intentionally and unintentionally disrespecting, dehumanizing, or devaluing them. What do you think?
You know, right away, it makes me think about, who are we keeping calm for? Like, typically for other people's comfort, usually, right? Despite what our own well-being is telling us. What are the messages that our body is telling us? When she was talking about being able to honor our own boundaries and being aware of our own human limitations, and that's part of what real resilience is. And yet with toxic resilience, it kind of does away with all of that stuff. And so it becomes about what other people want, what the organization wants at the cost to me. And so that's sort of what starts to come to mind, right? Like tough it out at what cost? Hustle culture to me is really about how much we can produce. So sort of like what we were talking about in our last episode, really that idea that we're machines, we are product producing
Yeah.
machines. The only
Yeah.
problem is that we're not, right? We're human. We're not machines. There's a reason why the World Health Organization described burnout as an official medical diagnosis. And burnout doesn't just mean we're tired, right? That there's a cost on our bodies. And so this idea of toxic resiliency, it just sort of reminds me of that old way of work that recognized that people are inside those organizations to create a product. And that's it. As if we can separate our humanity from our work selves. And we can't. So that's sort of what it brought up for me.
I really appreciate what you're saying, that it sounds like toxic resilience is a byproduct of a culture in which we don't acknowledge or tend to well-being, where we don't prevent or really work to prevent burnout, as you were saying. And I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I really firmly believe that it's a culture we have gotten into the habit of thinking about resilience as strength, as like a test of someone's strength, and it really frustrates me. I'm just going to be honest, to no end, that we often forget to acknowledge that, for example, like most organizations are not designed to help those handling stress and trauma created from the very place that is creating the stress and trauma in the first place.
Yeah.
And so we define this then as like, for the individuals in that organization, we define this as like weakness, or we blame them for not being able to suck it up, for not being able to keep calm and carry on, to just live with that stress, with that like toxic stress. And as Dr. Nokar said, living with discomfort is not resilience. And I love that she points out, like, living with discomfort is not resilience. We need rest and recovery. And I feel like that can't be just on us as individuals.
Yeah.
Like I get we have responsibility, but it can't just be on us as individuals. Like that can't just be on the folks who are struggling with the stress of being disrespected on a daily basis to handle. So for me, especially for this conversation about belonging, and this conversation where we speak so much about how organizations can create cultures of belonging, it seems like it's particularly important to think about how organizations build support for resilience for their teams, because that is going to be essential to well-being.
Yeah.
Which we know is something all of us need. But as we discussed in episode 4, we also know leads to increased profits and cohesion and productivity and more.
You just made me think about something that I hadn't thought about before. And that is the organization's responsibility for the well-being of its employees. And I'm thinking about this in a different way, I think, than I had. This is an original thought. So don't, it might be my first bad thought, as a friend of mine says, right? But the organization takes responsibility for us as humans working inside of that organization in ways like, if you slip and fall at work, the organization covers it. There's workers' compensation for that reason. There's discrimination clauses that says you can't tell me that I didn't get a position because I am whatever age and whatever gender. Like, you can't do those things. The organization looks out for me in that way. The organization looks out for me in terms of giving me a set of work hours that I work, right? So the organization takes responsibility for my well-being in a number of ways. Why not here? And so this is like, for the first time I'm having this thought, but this is an area that we may have been missing inside of organizations is the full breadth of the responsibility that by someone signing the dotted line that, yes, I accept this offer of employment. I choose
I
you as an
commit. Yeah,
organization.
I commit to you. I
I
commit to
commit to
this
you.
organization. Yeah.
I will take care of you by doing my job and making sure that you advance your mission, that you create the products that you say. I do all of those things. I do my part. Your part as an organization is to take care of me in these ways. Now, I'm not suggesting that the organization is your therapist, that the organization should make sure that you're making good decisions about yourself. Like all of those, we need to take the onus of that on ourselves as employees. And I think when we're talking about recognizing human beings in the fullness of our humanness and how we show up to work, and that we can show up and be our full selves, our full professional selves, include that caveat.
Yeah. It's an important distinction.
Right. And that there's a difference between who we are and the things that we plug in, right? So how I work in that space should be treated differently than how the copy machine is in that space. And I think that there has been a conflation of everything that works in the organization. That is what leads to that idea of toxic resiliency and the idea of setting clear boundaries, saying, I understand that you want me to do this, but if I'm going to do this, then what is going to be taken away because I can't do all of it, right? Having
Which so
some
many of us are
limits.
scared. Yeah, there's so much fear around doing that,
Yes.
right? I mean, like you're to advocate for yourself, which is literally being resilient, is what she's saying, right? Like she's
Yes,
saying
I
that
love that
what
connection.
yeah, I'm advocating for myself, so I am being resilient, which is what you need me to be as an employee,
Yes.
because work is stressful. And instead of acknowledging that or tending to that, I'm afraid to say it even because I'm afraid you're going to look at me as, like you're saying, being weak, as being not able to suck it up, as not being a team player, as not being productive, etc.
Yeah. So there's a book that I love, Rest is Resistance, Trisha Hersey. And she has a line inside of that book that says something to the effect of, I refuse to donate my body to a system that still owes a debt to my ancestors. Let it breathe. That right there is what I think about in terms of the reason for resiliency, not toxic resiliency. Not toxic resiliency that's going to take away from my body. It literally takes away from my life. But that line in that book reminds me of the importance of honoring our boundaries, as was played in the clip, being able to really recognize the fullness of our humanity, our need to rest, and that being resilience. It's she flipped it totally on its head, the idea of resilience, right?
Yeah. I think it's interesting to me because what I hear you saying is that organizations have not taken on the responsibility when you sign on the dotted line of thinking about the whole person and making sure that they are giving you that rest and that recovery and building that in. And what I would add on to that is, and as a result, organizations are actually decreasing their capacity and productivity. They are decreasing the opportunities they have to tap into the human element of resilience because they're skipping their obligation to the whole person.
Mm-hmm.
And in skipping that obligation, what I hear her saying is, right, then we end up in this kind of Energizer bunny that burns out and you just replace the batteries and keep going. There's no thought of the whole person, but that is actually detrimental to the organization's goals, to its mission, to its, sure, to its bottom line, but like to its values too. Most organizations have something about in their values about how they value the people that work there.
Yeah.
They value their
Absolutely.
employees, right? So it's like, what are you valuing? Their productivity? It's like, well, actually, if you're valuing that, then giving rest and recovery is an essential part of that because that's what nurtures resilience.
And I want to name something. I want to be really fair here. Most organizations aren't saying you should work 10, 15-hour days. Most organizations aren't saying you should be checking your email all throughout the night on your
Right.
phone. Most organizations aren't saying you should be responding to phone calls on the weekends. Most organizations aren't saying those things. You won't look through their documents, their policies,
Yeah, they're not
procedures.
sending emails
They're
like,
not
yeah,
sending, right? You will not see that. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is a culture, what's been
yes,
normalized inside of organizations. Do you have managers who are sending the emails late at night, who are expecting that people pick up the phone when they're on vacation, right? Like all of those things. So it's not that we're saying this is codified inside of
a
your
policy or something.
manual of standard procedures,
Yeah.
right? But it is about that, the habitual practice that we have as a culture that practices toxic resilience,
Yeah.
that reinforces to employees that this is what they too should be doing,
Yeah.
which then
Yeah.
communicates that
Yes.
who you are as a human is not valued here. Who you are as a producer of a product is what we are looking for.
You know, what you're talking about there makes me think something else about resilience that I've wondered about for a long time, which is defining how we can be resilient in different ways. And so instead of thinking about resilience as bouncing back or strength or moving on or those kind of things, but also thinking about it as something completely different. Like, what if we were to think about resilience as a radical act of self-acceptance?
Love that.
That, like, that part of our resilience, our recovery from stress, can come with an acknowledgement that what we've experienced is like part of us, right? Like the hardship we endured, that's part of us and not something that we should have to feel shame about. Um, you know, if we practice radical self-acceptance, which is hard, I think, in our culture to do, just generally speaking, but seems to be particularly hard for people who are enduring disrespect and dehumanization constantly because they're taught to see themselves through this incredibly negative lens and have to kind of combat and resist that regularly. That there should be no shame in the reality of, like, I take all of me, and if you think that's faulty about me, that's on you, not me. And for me, I feel like this is something that could facilitate our well-being overall, this acceptance, because it's hard to radically self-accept when you're working and living in a world that is just constantly telling you that you're less, right? That doesn't recognize or value your full humanity, as we were just talking about. And so resilience in this way is like a tremendous act of courage. It's an act of courage in that it asks us to accept ourselves in spite of the negativity and the toxicity that others are throwing at us.
Mhm.
But it also means that for those of us who want belonging, and I mean for all of us in organizations, leaders, everybody, that for those of us who want belonging, we want well-being, we understand the value of it, and we want it for ethical reasons and for business reasons, that we need to be seeking out opportunities to support that courage, right? To support that courage for those most in need of that courage, for those who are going to have the hardest time with self-acceptance because of the way the world has come at them, as the way the world has been cruel and unforgiving to them.
You know, you're making me think. So this idea of radical self-acceptance to me has a sister,
Yeah.
and that sister is showing up unapologetically.
Yes.
And
There.
those two things, especially I'm thinking about people who are minoritized inside of this country, marginalized inside of organizations. It's difficult to accept, as you were just noting, right? My self-acceptance when the world is constantly telling me the reasons why I don't belong here. And so that unapologetic showing up means that I'm able to say, thank you so much for the question. I'll get back to you on Monday. I'm on vacation, right? It's that.
I'm giving you a round of applause.
But it's that takes courage, as we say,
and
but
practice.
it takes practice. And to your point, you said that needs to be encouraged, and it made me think about one of the things that I love when people do. I'm a little nervous saying it on here, but I'm going to say it anything.
Go for
One
it.
of the things that I love that people do is when I ask for something and they say, no, I
Good.
can't right now because
Yes.
whatever it is. They don't even have to tell me the
Yeah.
because, but what I receive from that is I need to choose me right now. And that me
Yeah.
right now does not include me accepting this opportunity with you. And my
Absolutely.
response to them every single time is thank you so much for
Yes.
having clear boundaries. Thank you so much
Yes.
for taking care of yourself in that way. Thank you so much for being an example for me and others on how we can set parameters, set our own boundaries that are clear and kind, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
No, you're saying that, and we literally, the two of us literally just had this experience a week or so ago. We were looking to book out guests. We asked a colleague who we love and adore, and have
Well,
worked with for years, and is a person who has probably said yes to so many things in her life so many
absolutely.
times. We asked if she would be interested in being a guest, and she was like, I can't, exactly what you said. I'm going to set this boundary. I can't do that right now. And she was super kind about it and
Yeah.
everything, but both of us were like, good for you.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for setting that boundary for you and for me, because
Mhm.
I'll never know if what I'm asking is too much, if you're unable to set that boundary. And we have to model acceptance of that.
Yeah.
Like we have to radically accept people setting boundaries.
Yeah.
And value that and reward that as something that is literally practicing resilience.
Absolutely.
So we're thrilled to be introducing our very first guest on the Belonging Chronicles, Dr. Carol Battle. Carol is a 25 plus year veteran of public education. Her experiences as the one African-American student and teacher in most of her academic settings have shaped and driven her pursuits in equity and diversity issues. Dr. Battle taught in both Texas and California and in charter and traditional school settings. From 2018 to 2020, served as Cal State University San Marcos's distinguished teacher in residence. Her emphasis on all campuses has been infusing analysis of texts and historical events with a multifaceted lens. Recently, Dr. Battle wrote a chapter for the book Empathetic Storytelling, Volume 2, Sparking Transformation in Education. In her essay, Daring to Let My Crowning Glory Shine, she reflects on her experience as a Black teacher navigating racial bias and assimilation pressures within a predominantly white school environment. Despite her reputation as a beloved, rigorous educator, she felt unwelcome to fully express her Black identity, particularly when she chose to wear her natural hair to work for the first time. This decision, while empowering, exposed her to microaggressions and feelings of isolation. Carol eloquently recounts moments of racialized harm she endured from both students and colleagues, and the internal struggle of code switching for survival in a space not made for her. Her reflections highlight the broader challenges Black educators face in systems that overlook or suppress their culture and identity, underscoring the need for equity and allyship in education. So with that, we are beyond excited to welcome Dr. Carol Battle. Hi, Carol. Welcome to the Belonging Chronicles.
Thank you so much for having me. It's hard to even hear that. That's me. Wow. So thank you.
Your story is about belonging. So to start us off, let's talk about that hair journey, because that's central to Black women's experiences of belonging. And I don't think this is something that everyone quite understands. So let's break down why wearing our natural hair is such a triumph and carries so much gravity.
Black women and natural hair goes way back to slavery, particularly in Louisiana. There was something called the Teon laws, that Black women could not walk around with their hair uncovered. And so Black women decided to be fabulous as we are and started wearing elaborate headscarves, which then were outlawed. And so from that point forward, our hair has been almost introductory to who we are prior to us even opening our mouths. And so the straightening of our hair, trying to look as European as possible to be, quote, accepted in professional and academic spaces, then became the norm. And in the 60s and 70s, we had a bit of a natural hair movement with afros and braids and things coming to be, but they still were not considered professional. And you can fast forward that to as recently as the last 5-10 years, where the Crown Act was written and surfaces to make it illegal to discriminate against any kind of Black hairstyle. So many of us have decided to, quote, again, be brave and stop straightening our hair, stop using chemicals, stop using heat. And as I said in my piece, show up with the hair that God created coming out of my head the way it was created to come out of my head. And that is just as much a part of me as anything else. Yet in many environments, it's still seen as different or odd or unprofessional. And so sometimes just showing up with your hair in its natural state is seen as either an act of defiance or an act of bravery.
When I was reading your piece and the way that you describe going to your place of work with your hair, feeling both proud and nervous. So that part of your story really resonated with me about how you found a way to bring your whole self to the workplace that day. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like for you, that feeling of walking in there in all of your glory?
Yeah, I can. It actually starts with a anticipation and anxiety about what is it going to look like. Preparing our natural hair is we're learning or relearning, I should say, unlearning some things and relearning some things. And so, and natural hair, I'll just say, it's like a gift, a present. You unwrap in the morning, you take your scarf off, you undo your twists or braids or whatever you have, and you see what's going to happen. And right, some days it looks like what you thought, and other days you're like, well, we're going to be cute in a whole different way. We're going to make this work. So once, I felt I picked the right outfit and my hair curls were just right, driving into work, just wondering how people were going to receive me. I literally was frozen in the car, just thinking about what's about to happen. And I had, kind of that little shock feeling in the pit of my stomach as I was going in, because I knew I was well liked at my school. That wasn't an issue. The kids liked me. I worked really hard. I had a lot of leadership positions in school, and a lot of people counted on me for a lot of things. So I had already proven that I was good at my job. And I got used to being the only Black adult at my whole school. It was a school of about 1,500 kids, I think, at the time. And there was not one other Black adult on campus, not a gardener, not a food service worker, not an office person, no one but me. So I had gotten used to that and gotten used to comments sometimes here or there if I was a little too ethnic, I'll say, or a little too cultural, because I stood out, but it was accepted, I say, might be the best word choice, because I was so good at what I did. But then when it came to my hair and my appearance, walking out in the world is already scary. And walking into a place that I felt this sense of comfort, wondering if that was going to get taken away. And that wasn't going to be, a place where I felt successful or welcomed because of the way that I looked. And then I would get upset almost that I even had to think about that. I even had to wonder, like, if this is a thing. So that was really hard. And then just knowing some things that had happened before, some of the conversations that I had had before, where I was explaining something cultural or explaining to another adult why whatever they were doing or saying was not okay, or why the curriculum piece that they wanted to use was probably not appropriate. And some of those things have been met with tension, but they didn't have that personal string to them. So I had a lot of tension, I think, internally, but of course, I had to play it cool because that's what we do. Everything's fine. I'm fine. Everything's great. When inside, things were just rumbling and twirling around.
I can feel the gravity of that. Thank you.
So, Dr. Carroll, in your essay, you wrote so much and so beautifully about the importance of self-acceptance. What is the importance of self-acceptance in finding belonging?
Yeah, self-acceptance is crucial. It's if you don't love you, if you don't look out for you, if you don't see the value in you, it's really, really easy for others to not only not see those things, but to really take you for granted. You have to know when and how to advocate for yourself, how to stand up for yourself. And if you don't have that strength inside, you're not going to be able to do that. And I realized, um, you know, it was a journey for me starting from being little and always being the only little brown kid everywhere I was going, that I had to always hold my head up and I had to always be strong and always know I was going to be the one different one, the one whose hair didn't go flat in the swimming pool, as a little kid, or the one whose family had, my family was from Louisiana, I'm in California, different food, a lot of things different. But if I didn't have something inside me that said, you're great, I love you, you got this, you can handle this, you're beautiful, you're strong, you're smart, the world doesn't tell you that so often. So you have to have a wealth of that within, so that when you're with a group, okay, these are my people, or this is something that's okay with me, this is something that's not okay with me, and feel strong enough and confident enough to speak to protect yourself. But it takes a lot out of you. It's a whole extra layer of energy and work that you have to do wherever you are.
Yeah. You talked a lot about being liked at the place that you worked, and I wanted to ask you about some advice. What advice might you give to someone who likes their work, right? They like their coworkers, but they don't necessarily feel that sense of belonging, in particular for Black women. Any advice you have?
Well, that's a great one. I feel in some ways that's $1 million question. And in many ways, I'm still seeking that myself. I can think of so many workplaces where people are nice. That's great. They're nice, but that's it. The relationship doesn't go there. The trust isn't there. So honestly, I think the advice that I have is be true to yourself and stand firm in what you believe in, that sometimes it is going to feel lonely. And sometimes belongingness is going to be out of your reach in that particular environment, but that doesn't mean that you'll not find it. So I know that sometimes belongingness for me was going to friends who worked at another school or social groups outside of school. I had to seek it in other places because it's essential to feel that you have a home and belong somewhere. But sometimes at work, it's better not to force something than to have to give up part of your identity in order to even kind of fit in. I can say in so many places that I've been, I wasn't excluded and I wasn't included, but I was tolerated. And being tolerated is not being a sense of belonging either. So you're not going to feel that sense of belonging everywhere. There's a lot of really amazing people out there, but you got to go find them sometimes.
All right, Dr. Carroll, that was a rich and beautiful response. Okay. So social psychologist Jeffrey Cohen wrote a book called Belonging, right? And in it, he refers to a concept called belonging uncertainty, which he defines as the state of mind in which one suffers from doubts about whether one is fully accepted in a particular environment or ever could be. From your work, what have you learned about belonging uncertainty that you think people should understand?
I can think of a particular work environment that I've had where my coworkers thought they were being so kind and so nice and thought they were being so inclusive. And in essence, they were, but I was always internally wondering, do I belong here? And it was beyond skill. I knew skill wise I belonged, but socially, it was taxing to always wonder that. There's something called like the black tax. And I feel like this is one of those components of it. There's so many little things that make you tired that you are dealing with all the time that people who don't look like you do not recognize or understand that are going through your mind in addition to doing your job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Thinking back to your chapter that you wrote inside this book, you referenced making the choice to freeze. In the way that you wrote that freezing, I hear agency that I don't commonly hear associated with that word freezing. Was that intentional on your part?
So freezing in the moment was protective of everybody, actually. It was protective of me, so I didn't mess around and say something I shouldn't have been saying at work. It gave me a chance to stop and think about it. And it surely protected the other person where I wanted to say something and I was like, no, this is not going to be helpful in this moment. So in that sense, it was a choice. I think, like I wrote in the chapter, the difference now, I would have really gone back and addressed it in a number of ways where I did address it a little bit, but not the way I would have now. Because there was a time, and I think this is kind of a progression that we go through as we mature, kind of along a continuum of selfhood. I don't need to hurt myself to teach you. I don't put myself in those shoes often anymore. I think when I'm working with students, whether they were my middle school students or adult students, they get a pass in a lot of ways, but it's definitely a teachable moment. Well, with older adults, like my peers who I feel like they should really know better, they're going to get a much more direct version where I'm not sacrificing myself and my feelings for theirs. Because I'm just as important. My feelings are just as important. And in fact, I was the one that was harmed. So it's freezing sometimes I feel like is a way of, it's caring for yourself in that moment.
I love that so much. And the wisdom in the freezing, right? Like you said, I'm no longer sacrificing myself for the comfort of others. So I think there's such wisdom in your decision to freeze because you preserved your ability to move on, to advance, to seek other opportunities, and to shine outside of this environment that was costing you, from what it sounds like, a great deal. You wrote in your essay chapter about the regular microaggressions experienced by Black teachers, saying, "It is these types of relationships between Black educators and their peers that affect Black teacher attrition. These types of statements represent the lack of supportive peer relationships that Black teachers experience, leading to feelings of isolation and disconnect at their sites. Recently, we've learned more about work trauma. What systemic or institutional changes are needed to address this work trauma?"
I think everyone needs training. Everyone needs to practice the difficult conversations. Everyone needs to learn even what a microaggression is. There's so many folks who I have worked with who, I don't want to say refuse to have DEI type training, but they think, oh, I don't need that. I love everyone. Yet they're the ones microaggressing the most. And so it takes district support and administrator support to ensure that every teacher is involved in some kind of, training systems, community, network, norming. All the teachers need to be involved. And so that's got to, unfortunately, be mandated. Everyone's participating in whether it's book clubs or speakers or whatever the thing is, because left to our own accord, teachers are super busy. And if we're going to choose training, we're not going to choose something that's going to make us uncomfortable. And so therefore it has to be part of your school community, part of your school culture, which means it's got to come from above, working its way through. So that's part one. And then part two, and I say this in all honesty, is like, if I go to an administration and say this thing has happened to me, believe me, please don't make excuses for the other. Oh, they didn't mean it like that. They're so kind. They have a Black husband, whatever it is they're saying. It's like, the thing still happened to me. I'm not spending this time coming in here being vulnerable with you just because I like it, and even if they didn't mean it, that's all the more reason why you need to do something. A conversation needs to be had. Restorative practices need to be encouraged. Something needs to change because I'm being harmed. And right now I'm going to the person who's supposed to help me and you're telling me, no, you're not. So I need to know as a teacher that I have a supportive administrator who not only understands, but is going to have my back if I come and say something is going on, or if they hear something, because I know they do. And, I have been in that situation where I know teachers have been known to say certain things or act certain ways or make certain judgments, and they joke about it. Okay, but those jokes are insulting and they're not okay. And I shouldn't have to be the only one, again, who stands up and says, this is not okay. When other people hear it, you hear it as the administrator, do something, just believe me, listen to me, and don't cuddle me or say, I need to calm down. I was violated, but there's so many times I just didn't say anything. I didn't say anything because I didn't know if I could trust my administrator or not. I didn't know if they were going to be one of those people who I will go to, and then they would tell me what the things I just said, like, oh, it's in your head, or they didn't mean it, or let it blow over, give it some time, that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, now I know I can't go to you either. That's what I learned from the conversation. And then I know that the teacher that I am, I get sad because I think about how many kids have come and said something and got the same response. I think that's really where my fight comes from, is like, I can handle it. It hurts, but I can handle it. But I'll be damned if you're going to do that to one of my kids. And then you wonder why I don't feel like I belong. Because all of those things are going on underneath with every conversation I'm having. That's taxing. I'm tired. I don't want to have to wonder how I'm going to be received. I don't want to have to wonder or be tone policed. I actually just did this the other day with, okay, I'm upset right now, but if I say something wrong way, I'm going to be the angry Black woman, and whatever I'm saying is going to be discounted. Even though it's genius, because I'm saying it in an animated way, which also, my dad was very animated. Naturally, this is who I am. I talk with my hands. I gesture. I get loud, but it doesn't mean I'm mad. It means like I really mean it, But if I have to always explain that everywhere I'm going, I don't belong. If you just welcome that, you embrace that, you're like, yeah, I'm going to get excited right alongside you, then that's someone or somewhere that I do feel a sense of belonging. But if the cultural norms of the organization or school or classroom or whatever are where I have to shrink myself or, change myself, watch my tone, watch my hair, watch my clothes, watch what I bring for lunch, watch who my friends are, watch what TV shows I talk about, I don't belong.
That was so good. Okay. You got 2 questions left. Are you ready? Okay, here we go. So next question is, if you were looking for employment today, given your experiences with belonging uncertainty in the workplace, what would you be looking for from that new employer, like that new work environment? So when they asked you, like, do you have any questions for us in the interview? What questions would you be asking of them? What would you be looking for?
I would definitely directly ask about strategies to build community within the workforce. And I would want to, within their office, for instance, and I would want to hear really how they answer. It's, oh, we have potlucks and culture this and that once a month. Or then I'm clearly going to know, oh, right, this is not the place for me. I would want to ask them, how does generative conflict look in their environment? So when people are not getting along, what do they do? How do they encourage it? Conversations, or do they? Or is there even generative conflict? Do we just, oh, we all get along so well? Yeah, no, then I know that's not the place that I want to be. I would ask them how they encourage selfhood within their environment, and even if they look at me like, well, what is selfhood? Then I have my answer. I already know. But if people can show up as their whole and authentic selves, and a workplace seems to celebrate that, because you get more productive people if you allow them to show up as their whole selves, then I know that that's somewhere I would want to be. And those are not questions I would shirk away from. I would be very direct, and I would be watching body language. I would be listening for vocabulary. I would be listening for any kind of resources. Like, do they read a book together as a staff, or, how does the community work together? Because I know I'm okay by myself, but I sure would love a community that would help me be even better.
So we are down to our last question. And there was a particular excerpt from your chapter that we would love it if you would just read it to us. And then I have a question for you.
I realize now that I owed it to the students on campus who look like me, the teachers of color that would come to teach at this institution after me, and to that little girl inside me who the world told in both subtle and not so subtle ways that embracing her Black identity meant she was not enough.
So is there anything you want to tell that little girl inside you about herself? What does she need to hear to allow you to continue your work? What types of recreation or restoration would help her or help you continue your lifelong odyssey of building belonging?
Woo, okay, the tears have showed up. They're knocking at the door. I have been working to heal that little girl for so many years. And in fact, it's an image of 8-year-old me is who I carry with me when times are good, when times are hard. I think about her innocence and how she thought she could do anything. Wonder Woman was my hero, a girl of a certain age. So for many of us, and I mean OG Wonder Woman, not the most recent one. But I think telling her that she is beautiful and she is strong and she is going to save the world just like she always aimed to be. That's why she looked up to Wonder Woman so much, because she wanted to be that and do that. I would tell her that sometimes it's going to be hard. Sometimes people are going to second guess you or not believe you or try to silence you or put labels on you, but you just keep shining and go be a light wherever you are. Now, I was a Girl Scout too, or she was a Girl Scout. So we leave people in places better than when we found them. And that has been something I've tried to live by. And from that age on, everywhere I go every day is try to leave people in places better than when I found them, in spite of what's around me. I know that that's why I'm here. That's my role. That's why I have the gifts that I have. And I would tell her, just keep going, just keep going. And there's a lot of people that she's going to affect in a beautiful way as the years go on.
What that's similar.
That's got me tearing up too. That was thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Kara, before we let you go, we would like to play a quick game with you to help our listeners get to know you better. We call this game Rapid Reactions. So we're going to ask you some random questions, and you're going to share with us the first thing that pops in your mind. Okay.
But
Are you ready?
yes, I'm ready. Let's go. I'm competitive.
Okay, here we go. First up, favorite movie of all time.
Aliens with Sigourney
Fool.
Weaver. Yes.
Aliens, like the second one?
The second one,
The second one. Okay. Okay. A childhood hero, someone you looked up to.
Wonder Woman. Absolutely. Again, she's beautiful, strong, smart, and saving the world. I mean, what else could I aspire to be? So that, yes, Wonder Woman, all that.
All right. A song you want to dance to anytime you hear it.
Prince, 1999. Forever, yes.
A favorite book you've read recently.
Okay. I'm reading the Bridgerton series. So, what? Yes, I've watched them all, and now I'm going through all the books, and I can't pick a favorite, but the series, I'll say Bridgerton.
Okay. What's your all-time favorite guilty pleasure TV show?
Oh my gosh, all time, huh? I guess I'm gonna have to say Real Housewives. Any of them.
All right. All right.
Someone who regularly inspires you.
I think my mom. She's retired now, but she's just like the most positive person ever. So yes, my mom.
What superhero superpower would you like to have for a day?
Oh my gosh. I think the Flash so that I could do everything super fast.
A snack or treat that you just can't stop eating.
Chocolate covered almonds.
A current famous person you'd like to make prank calls with.
This is gonna sound funny. Kamala Harris.
I could see that being fun. Yeah. All right. How about a favorite childhood cartoon?
The Flintstones.
Best movie soundtrack of all time?
1999. Purple Rain. Purple Rain.
Which fictional world would you live in?
Bridgerton. I want all the clothes. I want all the pretty dresses. Yes, and the balls. Yes.
Nice. What do you love to geek out about most?
Oh my gosh. There's so many things. I'm such a closet nerd. I think maybe like earth sciencey stuff. Like if I go hiking, I'm pointing out all the things, or I want to look at the bugs and the kind of bark and what tree is that. Yeah, I think that's it.
Your favorite dream vacation spot?
So anywhere with clear water and white sand, any beachy, remote, like Fiji or somewhere like that.
Your favorite go-to comfort movie?
I think like Home Alone, maybe.
All right. Well, that's it. That's our rapid round of questions for you. Dr. Carol Battle, we want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your story, your wisdom, your tears of strength with us today. We deeply cherish you as our very first guest on the Belonging Chronicles. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
So this is our third and final segment for this podcast. We're going to do what we regularly do in our last segment, which is to answer questions that we're regularly asked in our work. So for this pod, the question was, if I am constantly made to feel like I don't belong, why should I have to create that belonging for others? In other words, if I'm regularly the target of others' microaggressions, for example, why should I invest in a relationship with them or build belonging with them?
Yeah, this is so good. And it brings me back to what Dr. Battle was sharing with us a little bit earlier about we have to make that assessment on whether or not that's the place we want to invest or not. I think that point is so incredibly important when we're talking about radical self-acceptance and showing up on unapologetically. I think this is a perfect example of that. We have to be honest with ourselves and decide if we want to make that investment. That being said, there is no perfect place to work. This idea that we're going to show up someplace and they're going to know all the things about us is probably not realistic. And so I have to, just like in any relationship, I have to be able to communicate the things that I need in order for that environment to suit me. Do we have the right amount of patience, capacity, or interest to do that? If we do, then showing up in our courage and being honest with people, not because we're going to celebrate and try and keep alive a nice culture, but we want a culture that means that we can thrive there and other people can too. We're not doing any favors by being nice to people when we are harming ourselves inside. If I feel like this environment harms me, then there's parts of myself that I will slowly start to keep away from the organization. I'll start to protect myself in ways that this organization no longer gets the full me. I don't show up as my whole self, which means what I do for this organization is just not going to be as good as if I were able to show up as all of me. And so I think those are the things that I start to think about, right? I do think that we have to remember that cultures of belonging are aspirational in most organizations. We weren't having these conversations in most places, not even 10 years ago. And so the idea that I'm going to leave this place and go to another one, it's going to be just right, Goldilocks, right? It's not. And so it's about making an assessment for myself of where I want to invest my time to build the kind of culture of belonging that is right for me. Because when I signed on the dotted line for I sound so old. When I signed the Adobe agreement, that I agree to work here, I didn't send them a manual to what needs to happen for me to feel like I belong, right? That didn't come ahead of me. And so I think there is an investment that I have to decide that if I'm willing to make or not.
Yeah. I appreciate that so much, Janelle. My response to this question is I'm going to start by actually not answering the question by those who were asking it. I am going to start by speaking to those who are not typically experiencing this. So the question, right, is about this idea of when others are constantly making me feel like I don't belong, why should I have to invest in them? And I want every listener who is someone that does not feel that way to take a moment and consider what it must be like and how hard it must be and how regularly this must happen, that we brought it up as a question that regularly happens.
Yeah.
And so for those of us who have that, and I'll use the word privilege here, who have that opportunity to navigate the world without that particular weight on us at all, regularly, or to navigate in particular our work environment without that weight on us regularly, I think it is incumbent upon us to start to question how we can try to actively make the environment a place where no one has to ask this question again. Where this question is just no more. So I want to start there because I think that that's an important thing for us to talk about. The other comment I'll make here has two components to it. And you were speaking to one of them, as did Dr. Carroll. And that is, first, there may come a time where you are in a work environment and you recognize that the people in that work environment are simply not going to be the people that build belonging for you. And that is where we were talking about boundaries earlier. But I do think there's something to be said about how we encourage people to set and support people as they set boundaries. It may be, as you were saying, because I think you had said, we may not be able to be nice. And so if there's a moment where you're having to hide your truth, where you are having to compromise your well-being in order to observe the niceties of tending to someone else, that's a good boundary, right? To think about and set. It's not always easy to do, and it is unfortunate that it has to happen in the first place. The second element to this, and I think this is something that I have come across a lot recently in particular, is this idea of values and not letting go of those core values when we are faced with stress and hardship and people violating those very same values for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue, I think we're actually seeing this nationally in a whole bunch of ways right now.
Yes.
I mean, like big time. And it is very hard to say, I value belonging when I'm sitting across from someone who is sometimes even intentionally working to tear down my sense of being valued, my sense of being respect. Like they're attacking. And it is toxic. And it is not to say that one should tolerate that, right? That's why I started with the other piece. We benefit from setting those boundaries. And it is part of living up to our values that we set those boundaries. At the same time, I don't want to lose my values to someone else's lack of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't say this lightly, because I'm not saying this as like in any way that there's an expectation that you should live up to this high bar when no one else does. But at the same time, like, yeah, that's who I don't know about others. Like, I am trying my best, even in the face of hardship, to live up to my best ideals, my best self. I'm striving to create a better world because I believe that's something that is incumbent upon me to do as a human being in the short time that I am here on planet Earth. And here's the catch, I don't want to let someone else steal that from me.
Mm-hmm.
I will, like, it's almost like the final boundary. I will not let you take my values from me because you refuse to live them.
Yeah.
And so in a sense that why should I do this if they're not willing to do it? It's because I don't want us to give that to them. I don't want to give that up. I want to be able to hold on to that because that value is for me. It's about me. It's about the world, right? But it's about me. It's about me tending to myself. And I think that's really important to keep in mind as well.
Yeah. I think that's such a rich point, right? We have to think about why we're doing the work, why we're doing it in the first place.
It is so important that we understand our why, and we do it for our why. And so the question begs another question. I think we're making an assumption that people believe in this because it's the right thing to do for them.
And I'm hoping that's the case.
And there are other folks who that's not the case. And I hope that in those situations that an organization could respond to a question like this and say, you do it because in this place, this is what we value.
Yeah.
And as long as you work in this place, this is what we're going to uphold. So when those personal values aren't there, hopefully organizations have something to point to that says in this place.
All right. Well, I think that wraps us up for this pod. Thank you so much for listening. This concludes this episode of the Belonging Chronicles. Please do subscribe and like. We'd really appreciate it. And tell 5 people, tell 10 people, tell 100 people about the podcast if you found it valuable. And if you'd like to reach out to us, you can always find us at revolveconsulting.com. We will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.